Hello and welcome to your City Hall. Today is Tuesday, April 21st, 2026. This is the opening of the work session. Mayor Teague is attending the Senior Center Volunteer Appreciation Celebration and so will not be here. You are with me today. And as such, I'm taking the reins. But before we turn to our agenda, I want to pause to recognize with deep caring and a moment of silence the many people of the Iowa City community impacted by Sunday morning's shooting. Thank you. And I am sure that Mayor Teague will also have some words upon the formal session's opening. So to begin, we have USG updates and a little bit of our own celebration.
Hello, everyone. We wanted to start out by just also acknowledging what happened this weekend. A lot of our student body is pretty rattled by it, especially our younger students who may have never encountered any form of gun violence before. And we tried to think of something like to write before coming up here, but didn't feel natural that way. I guess all I really want to say is that, especially online, there is a lot of nasty stuff being said and being spread around, and the way I've been trying to approach it is with a little bit of grace for some of our students, especially some of the younger ones who might not know what to do in these situations, not know who exactly is to blame or what is to blame. It's not an excuse for some things that a lot of people are saying online, but I think maybe approaching it with some grace when it comes to especially our student body is good.
Okay, and then coming up, we will be sending out our renter's guide survey, so get excited for that. We'll have that data soon. Also, I have yet to find someone who's suitable to replace my role, so we're going to wait until fall noms to see who's going to fill the deputy role. Then just like to say.
So that might become the new norm, waiting until the fall to fill the deputy role. But we'll see. So this is my last city council meeting in the role as city liaison. I've honestly been trying not to think about it because I don't really know what I'm going to do with my Thursdays now. Every first and third.
Tuesdays.
Tuesdays? I'm sorry. I've always had trouble with those too. It's the T. I'm dyslexic. It's the thing. Anyway, I just want to thank everybody here, staff and council alike, for everything I've been able to learn over these past couple years. For those of you who don't know, I have recently applied for the Masters of Urban and Regional Planning here at the University of Iowa that I'm waiting on to hear back from that. But my decision to pursue that path was largely informed by what I've done here, and I still want to go home to Kansas City, Missouri, and continue my work after graduation with the city back home and kind of building my community and helping it. So it's been a really, really great time here, and I'm going to miss it a lot.
Well, before you go, especially Ava, the city wants to recognize your amazing work, and truly each year that I'm on council, I see the engagement factor upped and upped, and the kind of work that USG is doing is amazing, and the updates that we get from you have been tremendous. So thank you so much for your service, and I'm going to read this in replacement of Mayor Teague. We want to present this certificate of appreciation to you for your thoughtful contributions during the 2025-26 year of service as the City Council liaison and alternate liaison from the University of Iowa undergrad student government, and for demonstrating commitment to student participation on this 21st day of April 2026. And the mayor sends his regrets that he couldn't be here to give this to you. Okay, moving on. We are on to agenda item 2, which is clarification of agenda items.
I had one question on the item 9L supplemental. for our attorney, and that would be just the gist of what that late handout is asking for. As I understand it, they're asking for a stay of the 500-foot rule. Is that the basics?
They are, and they are, but I probably can't say much more than that. I'm sorry, I misunderstood which item you wanted to have clarification for. Because I'm conflicted out
Sure.
Over that item, you can ask Mr. Sharonik when he arrives.
Sounds good. I'll do
Okay.
that. Thank you.
Okay. Are there other items for clarification? Hearing none, we will move on to item number 3, our information packet discussion. Let's begin with April 9th. In that, and of course, I don't have the IP up, the specific number, but it has to do with the bylaws of the nonprofit. Is that IP2? Thank you. I did have one question, probably for Attorney Grewers. Under section 4.09, the treasurer, sort of the duties, the roles, et cetera, regarding the treasurer. What I was wondering is, can we build in requirements for audits, or is that something that the board sets up after with a separate form from this document, from the bylaws? Or spelling out the need for, the board expects that there will be audits, say from a third party or something like that?
I hate to duck 2 questions in a row from council, but because I do not represent the nonprofit board,
Okay.
I think it would be best that be answered by the independent council the board will eventually
Okay.
take on. We did, that answer might be confusing given that we did put the bylaws out and available. These are, of course, just proposed. It'll be ultimately up to the board of the nonprofit to adopt or modify these. But yeah, I'm sorry, I probably should refrain from answering further.
I do have one follow-up
Sure.
question, though, that perhaps you can answer.
Okay.
If the board were to decide to make changes, would they have to then come back to council for approval of the bylaws, since it is coming to council to approve?
would
Or this
not-
is actually not to approve, this is just to give us a heads up?
Well, it's in between there. In answer to your question, no, they would not need to come back to council. What this item does on your agenda this evening is authorize staff to go ahead and file the articles of incorporation to kind of get the ball rolling and
Right.
create this new thing. And from there, once created, then you and the other
Then we
2
can-
initial directors would be in control and take the ball from there.
Okay, and yes, I am aware of the timeliness of the, just wanted to, but I did want to put that out there at least as a question in terms
Sure,
of
yeah.
what kind of oversights should we build in? So, and if that's just something to happen later, then that works.
Our IP, the IP that Councilor Alter was referring to, IP2 from April 9, exactly the same, or Articles of Incorporation from our agenda tonight, item 9M.
I'm sorry, what was the question?
Are they the same? Are they the same Articles of Incorporation?
The Articles of Incorporation have not changed from the prior version. Is that your question?
They're presented in the IP and also in the formal agenda tonight?
Right. Originally, we thought that they had been presented to you for last meeting. We were mistaken about that, and so we wanted to hustle and provide you with the versions that we had at that time.
Okay.
The Articles of Incorporation have not changed,
Okay.
but the bylaws have changed a little bit.
Okay, thank you.
And any discussion on the substance of the article should be during the formal meeting?
Yeah, if you're talking about a substantive discussion, yeah.
Great.
Okay.
Cool.
And to be clear, so if we have those substantive discussions, it should be on the versions that are attached to the formal agenda item, not the version in the April 9th packet.
Is there anything else from April 9th? Okay, let's move to April 16th.
Sure, we'll discuss my memo when it comes up in the formal agenda.
April 16, IB5, I just wanted to highlight that we have 2,503 in the waiting list for housing choice voucher, and we have 1,530 for the public housing waiting list. So we're still short in affordable housing.
Under IP3, pending work topics, I don't know if there's anything that council wants to bring up for upcoming. We do have, just as a reminder, one that struck me was the strategic plan prioritization. That is slated, it has a parents of for the summer, but if there's any work that needs to be done or any homework that we need to do, it's just good to have that in mind. And while this is also something that is absolutely raw and new, I wonder about putting on the pending work topics that we should talk about ped mal safety at some point.
I'd be okay with that, and I think giving us time to get more information before we have that discussion is going to be important. So whether it's the next meeting or a meeting after that, I think I would appreciate doing it, but making sure we've got something substantive to chew on.
And data to know exactly what we're dealing with.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, is there? Okay.
Yes.
Thanks. So it looks like there's a majority. Okay. Was there anything else from April 16th? I don't want to cut anyone off. Okay. Item number 4 is Orchard Court LIHTC project presentation. And at this, I will now turn it over to Jeff. Thank you.
Okay, 1 minute, please, while I get queued up. Okay, Jeff Fruin, City Manager. Thank you for the opportunity to present this project to you today. We're going to talk about this Orchard Court 4% LIHTC public-private partnership that's in front of us. And I'm going to walk you through kind of some introduction before we get to the specifics of the project. So we'll talk about some guiding principles from your strategic plan that were pulled from when working on this project. We're going to talk about the demonstration of need. Actually, I already talked about that a little bit with the notice of the voucher and waitlist numbers. We're going to review our active affordable housing efforts because this isn't the only thing that we're focused on right now. We're focused on quite a bit of different actions and want to make sure that we can cover those with you. Because staff is recommending that we use the Riverfront Crossings Fee in Lieu program, we want to make you or refamiliarize you with that program. Then we're going to get into the project and ultimately end with our recommendation for you tonight. So again, these quotes are taken from your strategic plan. So when you charge us to look at something such as affordable housing, we're going to pull from the plan and try to find elements of that plan that we can work into any project that we are working on. Our plan is broken up, as you know, into different sections. We have visions that talk about compact communities and areas with services readily accessible. We talk about neighborhoods that are compact and socially diverse. And then we get into broader kind of strategies. And we talk a lot about, in those strategies, partnerships, and there's definitely some partnerships here, and addressing the unique needs of vulnerable population and low to moderate income neighborhoods. And then lots of times we focus specifically on the actions. Those are the numbered items in our strategic plan, and I pulled out a few here that I think speak to the project we'll be talking about tonight. So we talk about significant scale affordable housing projects in our strategic plan, and we look for innovative ways to to leverage partnerships. And with this project, there are quite a few of partnerships to note. So I feel like there's quite a bit of that leveraging going on. And then on the financial side, we also talk about preserving our tax base. And one thing that we tried to do with this project that we'll present to you is ensure that there's full property tax payments still coming not only to the city, but to the other taxing bodies that rely on that tax base. So keep in mind all those threads as we get through the project. This is one where I probably don't need to do a whole lot of convincing. We've talked about this a lot, but just a couple of recent documents and reports that you've seen that project out a number of units per year. And as you can probably appreciate, there is some different methodologies into how you can come up with this. So I wouldn't focus so much on why these numbers may be different compared. We're comparing the 2022 Affordable Housing Action Plan that talked about 4,500 more units needed by 2030. And then you've recently been engaged with the comprehensive plan, which talks about 9,000 or more units by 2050. There's some difference in those numbers, but the scale is what you should be looking at. The idea is that we need probably that 350 to 550 more units per year just to keep up with the growth projections that we have. So what are we actually doing? What's our track record? These are units permitted per year, and I'll kind of walk you through this. On the left-hand scale there, you have just the raw number of units, and then the individual bars represent, the different colors represent the different types of units. So that lower bar that tends to be the largest are multifamily units that are created, and we have single-family, duplex, ADUs, and then the line across is that running average. And one thing I want to point out is just obviously there's a notable difference in the last couple of years. Really, when you look at 24 and 25, they were down years at a time when we need housing units the most. We're struggling to get those out of the ground. And that's not a criticism of local government. It's a tough economy to build in right now. We got interest rates higher. We have unpredictable prices. It's a very difficult time to be getting new starts when it comes to housing. So we're looking at ways across the board in which we can accelerate those types of projects. The other thing I would just note is that even when you look back at some of those years in which we exceeded 400 or 500 units per year, a lot of those are they consist of one or two really large focused projects. So you think about some of the really large student-oriented housing projects that we have. That could be 200, 300, 400 units in 1 year in just student-oriented development. We've also seen a lot of senior-oriented development. So while these multifamily numbers look really strong, our experience of late has been they've been very targeted to certain demographics, being students and seniors. And we know that those units are needed across all demographics too. Again, this project that we're going to be talking about, I think, is one of those projects that can reach across a lot of demographics.
Jeff, do you count at occupancy or count at permitting?
Permitting.
Yeah.
So again, what I don't want to do is fall into a trap where we are thinking about this project in isolation, as this is our only strategy. If this was our only strategy, we wouldn't be successful. We're going to have to continue to do a lot of different things to help spur housing opportunities and address the housing crisis that we have. So this list is not exhaustive. This list is really just meant to show you what are some of the new and emerging things that are happening, some of those ongoing things. A lot of the programs that we've done year after year, programs funded by CDBG, the $1 million from the Affordable Housing Fund that the general fund pays into the Affordable Housing Fund, and the good things that does. Those aren't represented here. These are things that are new and in the works to try to show that we are doing a number of things to try to accelerate housing in Iowa City. So on that very low income side, we've got a couple of examples. We're expanding the amount of housing that we own as a housing authority. So you've authorized in the last couple of years the purchase of a number of townhomes to expand public housing. You're well familiar with the partnership that we have with the county and the VA. for permanent supportive housing. We've talked quite a bit about the Summit Street project that staff is moving forward on, and kind of put together with that is the repositioning of our public housing. A few of these you'll notice have asterisks on them. Those are kind of new LOST initiatives or initiatives that are supplemented with LOST or anticipate some LOST help. We have dollars in our LOST budget for permanent supportive housing that will be new above and beyond what we've done in the past. Same with continuing a housing stability program that is largely being phased out because it was based on ARPA funds, building capacity in nonprofits and growing the aid agency. Those are just examples of things that we're doing in that very low income side of things. On that lower income side of things, we talked about using LOST to increase down payment assistance, to continue the student build program, and to bolster our neighborhood home ownership program. I would put this Orchard Court partnership in this category as well. This project does not address the very low income needs on the spectrum of things, but it does have rent controlled units that addresses what I would consider that middle low income section there. And then even on the middle and upper income, we're focused on that too. We talked about the comprehensive plan a little bit, but making sure our comprehensive plan can set the stage for zoning reform that will reduce barriers to market rate units. And then for those of you on the EDC, you had the initial staff proposal on a tax exemption pilot program too, also aimed at spurring market rate housing. So all these things are kind of new and emerging strategies, but tonight we're focused on just that Orchard Court LIHTC partnership. So because we're talking about using Riverfront Crossing affordable housing funds for this project, I want to just refamiliarize yourself with that. The city code requires that residential property that is rezoned to an RFC designation can either provide 10% of the units as affordable for 10 years or pay a fee in lieu of. For those properties that are maintained on site, rents are capped at HUD fair market rents or LIHTC rents, if that's applicable. The fees that are collected must be used in that Riverfront Crossings area. So we've collected the fees in this area. We have to spend the fees in this area. And then you can see the accounting of the fees listed to date. Most of these dollars have been collected in the last 3 or 4 years. You see a couple of the larger numbers with the Hive and Replay. Those are recently added student housing buildings in the Riverfront Crossings District, and you can see those consist of nearly $5 million of the funds that have been collected. So we've amassed amount of money now that we can truly invest to work on that large-scale housing that's envisioned in your strategic plan. This $5.8 million is just those fees collected. It does not include the interest that those dollars have generated, but that interest is available for us as well to utilize for this or other projects. I thought it'd be interesting to look back at for those Riverfront Crossings projects that have provided units on site, where in the AMI spectrum, the area median income spectrum, are we falling with those? So there is income verification processes, and again, there is a 60% AMI requirement, but you can see in practice that those units are actually serving many populations that are under that 60% threshold. And I think that's just important to keep in mind because there's similar requirements with LIHTC projects, and it's likely that when we talk about a 60% cap, those falling in to that 60% cap may not always be right up at that 60%, right? They may be at 55, they may be at 50, 45, and that's been our experience with those units on site. I think that would be our experience in investing the fee in lieu dollars as well. So let's talk about the project. You're familiar with the site because this was in front of you for a rezoning a few years ago. This is just behind or to the west of the Maverick gas station off of Riverside and Benton Street there. And Orchard Court is that cul-de-sac that's depicted there. And then this is kind of the schematic of the project that we'll be talking about. The project is a public-private partnership with a group called the Annex Group, and I want to introduce you to the Annex Group a little bit. The Annex Group is new to Iowa City, but not new to the state of Iowa, and actually develops all across the United States. You can see there that they have over 7,900 units across 48 different communities. When you drill down to projects in Iowa, I pulled out a couple here. These 5 projects here are scattered across Iowa. We have Waterloo, Dubuque, Des Moines, Council Bluffs, and Cedar Rapids, where Annex has either successfully delivered a project or is in the middle of delivering a project there. So I think we're working with a very experienced group, both in terms of the volume of development that they've done, but also working within the LIHTC realm. And a quick overview of the project. The total estimated cost for the project right now is $57 million. We're looking at a fully taxable project, and again, that's important. It's noted in our strategic plan as being important, but just tomorrow, the House is going to be voting on property tax reform, we're told. The Senate's already taken action on property tax reform. Bolstering that tax base is going to be incredibly important going forward. So when we think about innovative ways to structure this, the traditional way cities might assist LIHTC projects is through either tax exemption, which would take properties off the tax rolls, through grants. And in this case, we wanted to approach this in a little bit different way for a few reasons. So we explored this concept of providing a loan that would be secured by the land. So in this case, we're talking about a $5.1 million loan, which represents the sales price of the property. That gets to just under about $28,000 per unit if that loan amount is divided by the number of units. And it would be set at an interest rate of 1%. So one of the reasons we thought about structuring this as a loan is because I know the council has been very clear that they would like to see these Riverfront Crossings Fund get as close to permanent affordable housing production as possible. And one way to do that is to ensure that those dollars are paid back and that future councils will have the opportunity to invest those funds in more affordable housing down the road. So the way that this is structured conceptually is that there'd be an annual interest payment to the city of $51,000 and then a balloon payment in year 16. That balloon payment was estimated to be $6.1 million. At that point, we would have those dollars to be able to invest in other affordable housing projects. So we think we can achieve, and I'll get to this a little bit more, we think we can achieve 30 years of affordable housing through this project and then give a future council the ability to reinvest those dollars and get even more affordable housing down the road. Staff did have assistance with Baker Tilly. As you know, Baker Tilly is assisting us on our Housing Authority Summit Street project and just creating more development capacity in our Housing Authority. So we tapped into that expertise and utilized Baker Tilly to help us break down Annex's pro forma and test their assumptions and understand how best we can contribute to this project. You see the breakdown of units. They are proposing 183 units across 1, 2, and 3 bedrooms. There are 24 existing market rate units on that site. So some of those market rate units would go away with this project. From an affordability standpoint, we have 50% AMI. We have 15 units at that level. The bulk of the units are at 153 units are at 60% AMI, and there are 15 at 70% AMI, which balances them out at that 60% lever. So we have a total of 168 units at that 60% AMI or lower. And just like we saw with those, like we're seeing with those affordable units that are on site for those developers that choose to put them on site, I would expect that we'll have a range of residents in these units that go well below 60% AMI as well. The 4% LIHTC award that Annex has received ensures that at minimum it'll be 15 years of affordability, but the vast majority of LIHTC projects extend to 30 years. Plus, the Housing Trust Fund of Johnson County has provided an additional loan of just under $650,000, and they have a 30-year affordability requirement with that loan. So we're confident in saying that we'll be able to achieve a 30-year affordability period. And then again, have the loan proceeds to be able to reinvest in new projects, just as the trust fund structures theirs as a loan and recycles those dollars into the community. I will point out, just from a partnership standpoint, this is public-private. Annex is a private organization, but we are partnering with the Housing Trust Fund, who's also contributing, and we're also partnering with the state, who's awarded the LIHTC project there. Section 42, which covers LIHTC, prohibits source of income discrimination, and Annex has committed to us that they're committed to accepting vouchers, which we know is critical going forward. And Annex has agreed to provide the city with the first right of a refusal for outright purchase. So when the time comes for Annex, if they decide they want to sell, and sometimes that does happen as you get into that year 16, 17 of these LIHTC projects, the city at that time will have a decision if we want to purchase that property. So I want to kind of talk about what those alternatives would be, right? And to be clear, there are alternatives on how to invest our riverfront crossings fee in lieu dollars. And you all know that we've been thinking about that at the staff level. We've talked to you about potential land acquisition in the past. So let's focus on that too. If this isn't the type of partnership that you're looking for, land acquisition is one other. One of the challenges with land acquisition is, again, we're constrained to that riverfront crossings environment where prices are elevated quite a bit. So we have roughly $6 million in this fund. Those dollars may not stretch as far as you think. Again, this property that we're looking at now, the purchase price is 5.1. There's a 1.59 acres for sale in a different part of the Riverfront Crossings District. That's listed at 4.7 million. So that would be utilize the majority of the funds to assemble land for a project of this scale, right? Certainly you could assemble land for a smaller project, but if you want to get something of this scale, you're talking in that $4 to $6 million range. In addition, what's changed over the last couple years, we've committed to building that Summit Street project. We've committed to taking on the VASH partnership with the county and the VA. And we've also purchased a number of townhomes to add to our public housing inventory. So we have a bit of a limited capacity at this point to buy another property and start developing that, which is why staff started to shift our thinking from land acquisition and development over to this public-private partnership. In addition, you could look at building acquisition. So can we purchase units? Can we purchase an entire building in the riverfront crossings? That would be allowable. You could create new affordable housing opportunities where they might not exist in a particular part of riverfront crossings or in a specific building. But that doesn't add to the well-documented supply challenge that we have. So staff has not really pursued this option with any vigor because we're really trying to focus on producing more supply along with this effort. We'd also have limited impact on just economic benefit, right? We'd likely be potentially taking something off the tax rolls instead of encouraging more to come on the tax rolls and support our services. There's not much on the market right now. There is one just outside the Riverfront Crossings District that would not be eligible for our funds, but it's close and probably provides a comp so you can kind of understand what kind of the magnitude of cost. A 1971 construction with 442 total units is listed at $3.65 million. That gives you an idea of how far those Riverfront Crossings funds could stretch. So in looking at all those options, I think the value proposition for this public-private partnership is exceptionally strong. With the riverfront crossings, those fee in lieu, as a reminder, we've collected fee off of 68 units, or what would have been 68 units at a 60% AMI for 10 years. And what this project does is it produces 168 units, and that we're excluding that 70% units because those would not be eligible under our riverfront crossings program. So 168 units at 60 or 50 AMI income limits, and we're getting a minimum of 30%. We're getting a 30-year affordability period. So 3 times that of what would have been required had these properties put those units on site. So we're getting a high volume of rent-controlled units to the market as quickly as possible in a very desirable location. You think about accessibility to employment centers. This is about as good as it gets. We'll have full property tax generation. We expect that annual property tax, once you net out the existing properties on there, it's an additional $450,000 per year is our conservative estimate on what that might look like going forward. That would support, again, all of our taxing bodies here. We talked about the recycling of the loan. One thing that Baker Tilly did for us is they try to capture a kind of a return on your investment number. And what they do is they look at, for every dollar loaned, how much are we getting back to the city, whether that's loan repayments, property taxes. And they also put that rent differential in there. What is the rent, what's the difference between the rental caps of the LIHTC program and market rate? And they put that in that public benefit equation. And their analysis shows that they would estimate that for every dollar that we're loaning, we're getting $4.85 back. So that's not an exact science, but it shows that, at least from a pro forma standpoint, we're leveraging quite a bit, which again is one of those strategic plan goals. So just kind of end with this, because while we're looking for your guidance today to say, yes, move forward with the formal agreements that would come back to you for that final vote. We also just want to continue to remind you that staff is staying exceptionally busy and focused on doing a whole number of things at this time, and we realize the importance of hitting all of these different areas as we move forward to achieve your housing goals. Happy to circle back, answer any questions or clarify things.
Just a framing question. First of all, I'm very excited about this, and I think there's a lot of effort put into this. I'm very, very happy to see this as an option. But I am curious about what we're looking at. If this is the package that we decide we want to move forward with, or if this is a beginning of a negotiation kind of thing. And how would you characterize that? We know Baker Tilly has looked at this. They've reviewed it. It sounds from what you've said that they think it's fair, it's a good deal. I don't know. Just tell me where we're at with what we're being proposed.
Yeah, this is this is many months of back and forth negotiations, analysis. So I would say that this is a near final position here. I say near because we really haven't entered into those discussions on creating loan agreements or anything like that. So there could be some nuanced things, but the analysis that led to determining that it was going to be a loan, and what that loan amount should be, how it should be secured, the interest rate, that's all been the product of many months of discussion. And we did look at alternatives. We looked at tax exemption alternatives. We looked at grant alternatives where we were not getting those dollars back. Ultimately, we landed at the loan as the best thing for the city.
Thanks.
Can you go back to the affordability slide? Yes, project affordability. Yeah, I just want to ask you, because I think something here said that will be accepting vouchers, and 50%, 60%, it sound like really here look good. But my question will be, like, based on the pro forma that they provide, how much is 1 bedroom, how much is 2 bedroom, and how much 3 bedroom? And is this comparing to the vouchers? Somebody have a voucher, can they live there?
Yeah, yeah, compared to kind of the payment standards, yeah. So it's hard to project out what the rents would be in 2028, 2029, when a project like this could be delivered. So the 2025 LIHTC rents are the best that we would go on right now. So for one bedroom at that 60%, you're talking $1,330 is the rent.
But the voucher is not 1,300 for somebody who have, one bedroom vouchers.
Right.
The voucher limit is way less than that.
Yes. Yeah, could be. You could have a disconnect between voucher standards and that payment and the maximum rents there.
Okay, but how that gonna help us, help the people who have voucher if the Section 8, they're going to say, no, this is more than your voucher?
Yeah, if that's the case, they wouldn't have to accept the voucher. Now, they're still going to fill those units at that rent cap, so it's still providing needed housing with a rental cap.
Of course.
But if they're not, if there's a disconnect there 3 or 4 years from now, you might have a situation in which they accept some vouchers and they don't in other cases.
Yeah, because what I know from LIHTC program, my experience, like all 60% and up, most likely will be more than the vouchers for the people. That's why I don't know. But yeah, I'm not against the project by any means. It's really like we need to have more housing of all kind. But when you said this is going to be accepting commitment to accept the voucher, I was just thinking. How would that?
Yes, I appreciate you clarifying that. So their commitment would depend on that payment standard, right? So they're not going to deny anybody just because they have a voucher. But if that payment standard doesn't meet what their allowable rent is, they wouldn't be obligated to take that person. They may choose to. They may choose to work with that household, but wouldn't be obligated to.
One of the,
No, go ahead.
one of the things, especially since we're talking about GO bonds later tonight, thinking about risk of our loan. And I think on one of the slides, maybe the one before this or the one after it, talked about the loan being secured by land. Is that?
Yes.
There we go. So in a practical sense, does that mean if, God forbid, the company that does this 10 years down the line goes bankrupt, that we would get that 5.1 million balloon back? Or would it be the typical situation where all creditors would get some percentage of the value?
We're not going to be first in line with this type of loan, so we're going to be down the food chain a little bit on terms of who their creditors would be. So there's risk. There's going to be risk with this. There's a non-repayment risk that we have to be able to be comfortable with. That's one of the reasons we worked with Baker Tilly, is to assess that risk. Based on what they're showing, what does Baker Tilly see in the annex pro forma? Is it on very thin margins, or does it look like a strong project? So yes, there's some risk that we may not recoup all of this. I would say there's risk whether we were providing a grant, a tax exemption, a TIF offering. All of those different mechanisms carry some level of risk. With this one, I feel good, and I think Baker Tilly feels really good that risk is minimal, but it's absolutely there.
Just out of curiosity, I hear a lot that, like what you said, when it comes to LIHTC projects, that after the 15-year mark, the vast majority of the time they choose to extend to 30 years. I was just wondering how that calculation is made by these companies, and like what comes into play. Is there a way that we could encourage that, or is it just kind of up to them, or do they have to apply again? Or
Sure. Yeah, that's not something I am very well up to speed on. I think where we pulled that, where we felt comfortable leaning on that statement, is that the federal government has kind of issued reports talking about LIHTC and assessing the success of LIHTC, and I think vast majority is the word that they're using, but I seem to recall that it's 85-90% or more extend to that 30-year period. I don't know what that internal calculation is with the companies that do that. we could probably follow up with you, and I'm sure Baker Tilly or local LIHTC providers could answer that better than I can. But we do have some security because of the loan agreement from the Housing Trust Fund, which requires 30 years. But even if that, you set that aside, you set the kind of the vast majority standard aside, if we are only at that 15 years, you're already beyond the 10 years that would have been provided on site, and you're getting those dollars back. I still think that's a good deal for the city.
Jeff, just to be really explicit about how the Housing Trust Fund loan with its 30-year affordability requirement, can you just speak to how, is the assumption just that if they're having to follow through on that, it makes sense that they would continue the affordability period, or can you just tie that together for us?
So when not going to try to speak for the trust fund, but understanding that that the loan that the trust fund has offered came with a contingency or a requirement that they're going to be affordable for 30 years. So Annex agreed to that. I think if there was it was part of Annex's business plan to get out after 15 years, I think they would have probably addressed that with the trust fund and tried to strike a different deal with them. So that gives me some comfort there that they fully intend to exercise the 30 years. But to be fair, there are pathways out of LIHTC deals after that year 15. So I just wanted to be open with that.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, you'd mentioned the 10-year affordability period with the 10% affordable housing requirement for the Riverfront Crossings District. Can you just remind us a little bit about the history of that, just in terms of how the council at that time landed on those parameters, since we like it to be much more aggressive today?
Yeah, so when the Riverfront Crossings Code was being developed, there was a committee developed. I think the council created a committee. I'm going on memory a little bit here. Council created a committee of staff, maybe a couple of counselors and private sector individuals, and they kind of went through the exercise of how can we make this work to the point where the city's realizing the affordable housing benefit, but the requirements aren't so significant that it's going to stifle the development too. So they were looking at the increased density that the zoning was providing and comparing that to the difference in the rent-controlled units, the 10% units, and the market rate. And ultimately, I think it was a kind of a committee workshopping this to say, I think we can do 10 years or 10% at 10 years. And then we created that fee in lieu option, and that rate that they pay, that fee in lieu rate, which changes every couple years, staff updates that with the council every couple years, is really calculated to acknowledge the difference between the market rate and the rent cap that we impose. So what's the value of that over 10 years? And I think we've been anywhere from the low 80s to 80,000 for that fee in lieu, up to maybe 112 or 115,000
per unit, right?
Per unit.
You had a slide on that.
Per unit. So if you were to push that to 20 years, you would expect that becomes a bigger financial gap for the private sector to take on, which could or could not be a development barrier, and also that fee in lieu would be adjusted as well.
I have a follow-up history question if you're done.
Well, I just have one more history question. If you know, or maybe our city attorney knows, I seem to recall there was something about the upzoning and the affordability requirement, like trying to balance how much additional value the landowners could realize when we were doing the sort of mass rezoning with the district, or is that?
Well, like Jeff, I'm going off of memory as well, but I know that there was some discussion in our office about making sure that we didn't have a regulatory taking. And the rationale was that we could impose this requirement for affordable housing for two reasons. One, because inevitably the property, I mean, it's fully developed, of course, so it's redevelopment by its very nature. The properties that are being redeveloped are almost always going to be affordable, not by mandate, but by practical reality. Two is the Riverfront Crossings form-based code, I should just say the Riverfront Crossings zoning code allowed for this significant upscaling and upzoning and greater density that really provided a lot of value to the homeowners. And so that was, I should say, to property owners. And so that's the trade-off that made it worthwhile. Now, obviously, there's a balance there. We couldn't have said, well, we would like 50%, to be affordable. That probably would not have flown. Is that responsive to your question?
Yeah, that at some point, if we imposed requirements that were too much, it would be a taking.
Right. There's not a bright line there.
Right.
Yeah.
It also, part of our strategy when we adopted the code is we didn't do a large-scale rezoning of the riverfront crossings. We didn't automatically bring those properties in. So a lot of properties in the riverfront crossing are under our older traditional code, and it's really the property owner's decision to come in. And what they do is they would look at what can I build in this current code that I have, and what can I build in the in the Riverfront Crossings code, and they have to see that development potential there, even with the affordable housing requirements. And what we're seeing is that those developers are choosing, many of them are choosing to forego that traditional zoning district and come into the Riverfront Crossings district and work with the city to satisfy that affordable housing requirement.
So, two-part question about the history of this. Was there at the time that this was developed or now any requirement that the housing be permanently affordable, or would this project as a 15 or 30-year LIHTC project satisfy the intent of that fee in lieu requirement?
No, the fee in lieu does not mandate the code or any council policy does not mandate that we use fee in lieu for permanent affordable housing, but I can tell you for at least the last, since the councils have been working with this, that's always been a discussion is if we're getting that fee in lieu, how can we make sure we are going above and beyond that 10% 10 years? And there's been no council that said it would be, okay, let's target 10% for 10 years on a different project. It's always how can we get more units? How can we get a longer affordability period? And ideally, how can we drive the deepest level of affordability, the most units, and permanent affordable housing, right? All those three things are important. So it's really discretion for the council at the time the decision is made. There's no hard policy.
And the follow-up to that is right now we're required to spend this money within Riverfront Crossing. However, if we get 15 or 30 years of affordability out of this fund, is it feasible or plausible for us then to reuse that money in the future for anywhere that we were to choose, or a future council were to choose?
You want to?
I would be deeply hesitant to say that. We would certainly want to research that. As I mentioned earlier, one of the rationale was we're taking away affordable housing in Riverfront Crossings by redeveloping the property. And so to use the money and then park it far on the west side or something like that, that would make our argument more difficult, I guess.
But a 30-year affordability
that's on the other side of the argument. It's a good point.
Okay.
It's a fair argument.
So the answer is it depends.
Yes, that's right.
Okay.
As a lawyer, I'm sure they talked on the first day of law school. You should always answer every question with it depends.
And I'm not proposing that. I'm just interested in the flexibility affordance of this proposal. So.
When it comes to the current tenants that live at the 24 properties that are going to be demolished for this, I talked with a few of them, and I didn't know this, but and after reviewing some of the leases that they have, there is a clause in the lease of not until August, but like a 1 month, because they were informed that this could happen like 2 years ago, the tenants that currently live there. But when I talked with some of them that, these conversations were gaining steam, they had not been made aware of that. So it's been 2 years, and there's been this clause in there that we could kick you out in a month at the drop of a hat if we want. So I that's a little bit concerning for me, because I originally thought, at least they would have until like the next general cycle to find additional housing. But I think we all know that part of the problem is finding housing is sometimes hard in Iowa City, and especially when it's not during a regular cycle. So I fear that if we do this, then we, again, this isn't naysaying or anything. It's just bringing up if there's anything that we can do or we've done in the past for situations when it comes to relocating tenants. I know that there is certain maybe federal or state guidelines, but I don't know if there's anything that we could do that could be extra to help people out if they are all of a sudden, they've lived at this place for 2 years and now they got a month to figure it out. That's just a conversation I would want to have with the current tenants. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, the relocation assistance has been something the council has taken up from time to time. And in this case, my preference would be that we go back to the annex and ask them for what their plan is, and see if we're satisfied with whatever plan they may have in place. And if they're not, either encourage them to do more or think about how we might supplement if we're not happy with that. But I have not had those conversations with the annex yet.
Okay.
What is the time frame for this best case scenario?
I think that they would like to probably get started with some type of site work either late fall or into the spring of next year.
So when I think about your chart number 2 that shows a sad little bar for 2026, we may not.
Yeah,
we may not get the.
Yes, a project of this scale, as you all know, and seeing these types of scale projects move up, you're well over a year of construction. So it's hard to say, but 2028, 2029 delivery in terms of when these units might be occupied would probably be a pretty optimistic view.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of, I love the right of first refusal. I think that was a great thing for staff to work for and put in there. I think about Washington, D.C.'s right of first refusal, their TOPA law, and how it has specific requirements in there that this needs to be like fair priced, because they, a landlord could just say, oh yeah, we are offering it to you, but it's for $1 trillion, and then they will sell it to somebody else, make it easier. I just didn't know if that's something that is or could be in the agreement, that it needs to be some type of stipulation that it has to be fair. I know that's a very broad term.
We can look at that. We haven't got into those specifics. Generally, first right of refusal, as I would expect it to look in an agreement, would be that at any time if they have a buyer submit to them an offer that they're ready to accept, they would have to bring that offer to us, and we would have the ability to essentially match that and jump ahead there. So they would have to have a bona fide purchase offer from somebody for that to trigger. But we could look at, this kind of falls into the city attorney's office, they could look at different language and to ensure that the city's in the best position possible when it comes to that first right.
So this property's already been rezoned, right? So the item that we would eventually be voting on is what, a loan agreement, or what's it going to look like?
I'd anticipate a loan agreement or development agreement with.
Okay.
Yeah, something like that.
Okay. But we'll
Not
see
really
it
adding a lot
before.
to that conversation, but yeah,
Depends.
It depends.
it depends.
And so what you're looking for from us today is essentially direction about to pursue
Yeah, I mean, there's been a lot of work put into this in the last 6 months or more, I would say. And the annex is to the point where they're making decisions on whether to close on this property. And if they're going to invest considerable amount of taking this to a final design. And then from a staff standpoint, we're talking about a significant resource ask from the city attorney's office primarily to structure this agreement and bring it to you in a few months. So we don't want to spin those wheels if it's not something that you're interested in. We're not asking for a formal vote tonight, but if there's a consensus that this framework is a positive way forward, then we'd be anxious to take it to the next step.
Sure. Council, do we want to have some conversation?
I really appreciate the conversation and the concerns that were brought up, and and I think those are all manageable concerns. I'm very much in support of this. I think of the sad little bar at the beginning and how we've got to do better, and this seems like a great opportunity. It sounds like a lot of work has been done on this that indicates this is a fair deal for us, and it translates that money that's currently sitting into a bank into housing in Iowa City that we can spend in the future. A future council. I hope none of us are up here in 30 years, but I'm very supportive of this.
We've had a number of conversations, in our meetings with Jeff, as I think we all have, about this. And one of the things that came up, this historical perspective especially, was very, very helpful in terms of the council. Since we've been engaging with these affordability requirements, we're always looking for more. And so, one of the conversations that we had, and Councilor Sala, I don't mean to speak for you, so please jump in, but, you brought up the idea of using it on this project is not as deeply affordable or not as long-term as we would typically wish. And so I really liked the idea of let's use this money now for this. It's in riverfront crossings. It gets us what we need. But let's also accelerate the conversation so we're not waiting until year 16 when the money is repaid to be continuing to look for, in those other areas, whether it's land acquisition or building acquisition, the things that you went through at the beginning of the presentation. So I just wanted to add that to the conversation, just so that we can. And one thing I know the mayor has brought up, he's not here right now, but having like a funded CIP item for affordable housing, I know is something he's mentioned a number of times. So I don't know if it would be in the form of that or some other policy, but
I've considered, or I've thought about the idea of, I don't know,
An item, no.
or just like an RFP or something for a particular amount in riverfront crossings that matches this investment. So if someone comes forward with, it's like, hey, I can make this amount of money go this far, and then we would jump on that. Or I know we are going through a lot with 22 South Lynn, but but that's just something I was thinking about.
Yeah, thank you, Council Burgess, for bringing that up. Yeah, the more I calculate this, we're not talking here about affordable housing, let's be clear, but we need all kind of housing. That's why I'm excited about this project. But also in the same time, just like looking at 27,800 being given as a loan per unit. Sometimes I just close my eyes and think if we give almost 30,000, if we give it to somebody who want to buy 2-bedroom apartment, which is currently, there is some of them listed for 112, and if we subsidize them with a loan of $28,000 or $30,000 and 1% interest for 16 years to retain it back, that will make it like $1,741 per year. And if they're paying it monthly, they will pay only $145 to the city. And they get their own home, which is affordable and everything. And we will get 183 unit too. That's why using the fund from riverfront crossing, it's okay because we have to spend it there. That's fine. But if we're really aggressive like this, we need also to be more aggressive and match the same fund that we use it for all kind of housing to a very affordable housing. That's why really want the council, encourage the council to think about, okay, can we take from the reserve at the same time, like matching $5.1 million and name it, put it aside for, affordable housing, because I believe anyone who pay more than 30% from their income, doesn't matter what kind of house they live at, this is not supposed to be. They're supposed to be like 30% or below, so we can call things affordable for them. That's why the more I think about it, the more I said, okay, no problem. We can subsidize this. We can use this, give them this fund. But at the same time, let us name it from the reserve that $5.1 million match to do something else about affordable housing.
Yeah, I appreciate those comments. And I think we are doing some things in both those areas that councilors talked about. The CIP item, this is the first time in my tenure that our CIP has included an affordable housing project, with the Summit Street project being partially being in that CIP. So that's exciting. And then just today, I'm glad you brought that up. Just today, Tracy Heitschuh and I were discussing the South District Home Ownership Program, and we're about to put 2 units on the market if they're not on the market already. But I think the list prices for those duplexes are $170,000 roughly, and then through our down payment program and forgiveness program, ultimately they would be the future buyers would be financing about $110,000 to get into those duplexes, which speaks exactly to the kind of the vision that you have for those loans. So I think we're doing some of those things, and happy to try to accelerate them if that's kind of the direction that we want to go to. And clearly, you all know that we've been given from the voters a great opportunity with LOST to do some of those types of things.
Yeah, and I just want to make sure that you also understand me. Yes, let's keep doing all the things. Right now, I'm not suggesting doing certain kind of project. I'm encouraging that we need to, all of us to agree that we're going to take $5.1 million from the reserve to put it aside for affordable housing. That's exactly what I'm asking the council.
You and I talked about that, but which reserve are you referring to?
Just the general reserve, because we have money there, and I talked a little bit about this to Jeff, and he said, yeah, we can take it from there. There is no problem, but I want you guys to give that directions.
I'd be happy to give that some thought, but I don't know that.
I think it's backwards thinking. We should know what the project is and the thing we want to build and do, and then borrow them, come up with a project, right?
I mean, earmarked, so it's
Just having money in reserve so that it doesn't get kicked down the road
Yeah.
in perpetuity, to say, yes, we'll have money, but we're never actually going forth to it. I mean, I see your point as well, but there is something to be said about our commitment to know that we have money in reserve that
It's
will
about
be.
signaling commitment.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
And I think that's
Yes, exactly.
Councilor Zally's point.
Yeah.
Before we go to, I think that we've had a lot of head nods, and I also agree. I've seen this project or heard it and have been thinking about it as in previous councils' tenures, there was a lot of conversation about the missing middle, right? And I think if this is like the multiplex version of missing middle, it is not deeply affordable, but people at all stages, to your point, talking about 30% regardless of what your income is not easy for a lot of people here. And so I believe that this is at once incredibly important to get this amount to get over $4 back in return is insane and wonderful. And then also that we will be able to, given the location and who the folks are who live in that area. I used to live in that area when I was a grad student. It's grad students, young professionals, young families. I think that this is a really good project for that. So I just wanted to sort of put my own 2 cents worth in before we sort of veered into talking about, yes, and what else can we do? But I know that there have been some conversations about that because the 4% has been secured, the city doesn't really need to contribute in this way. I would counter that perspective by saying that at once we know how much we need housing, and our reputation is lagging in relation to how the council feels about development. Iowa City has a long time reputation of being, quote, difficult to work with from developers. And I feel like this has been months of negotiation and of hard work and of collaboration. And if at this point, honestly, given the benefits that we could be getting, as well as what the developer wants to garner from it, we really are talking about both sides of our mouths if we go back on this. And I'm pleased that we're not.
Yeah, I think I would agree with that, and I think too some of the stuff about the specific project that really jump out at me as strong positives, leveraging our funds to actually get the building going. So if we were to buy a piece of property for this amount of money or for some considerable fraction of what we have, we'd still have to start the process of finding somebody else or come up with, for this many, another $52 million. Using this as a model, right? And so, that would be another, we wouldn't be talking about getting our loan in 15 years. We'd be talking about the apartments finally coming open in 15 years. So, I'm very aware too that this particular site could have a whole bunch more housing on it today if some things had gone different. In the past. And actually, it was, the majority of the council was in favor of that earlier project. So that's history, but that actually, I remember that. And so having this property move forward and getting those into our community, I think is good. The fact that there's a partnership already with the Housing Trust, I think that really speaks well for this. So I think I also was one of the head nods, and now I've put some words behind that, so.
And I just really want to commend staff and, even just the kind of the culture of how we're talking about this, that with the depth of unit shortage that we have, which I agree, Josh, that little sad bar is sad, that we're not pushing forward with like supply at any cost. So thank you for knowing that we're in a place where we're still getting this additional value. I think that's great.
So,
Yeah, you
think
can
they have what they
see if there is consensus with the council, want to do the same thing.
so it looks like consensus from the council for those conversations to move forward. And
And the reserve.
and the reserve, let's bring that up now. I think there was, I'm not sure of the head nods.
Are you talking about the emergency reserve? What reserve are you talking about?
Just a general fund.
The general fund reserve.
Okay. Yeah, that's.
And so in terms of next steps and direction, would this be something that we would ask staff to come up with something that would indicate that there would be a carve-out for a future, for
Yeah.
affordable housing? What would that look like, and what?
Bringing up the pending list here, because a couple meetings ago, I believe, yes, under other topics in your pending work session list, you have a review of financial reserve policies. I think that's a good time to look at it. You've got your general fund reserve, which we have a policy to be between 25 and 35%. We're almost always at that 35%. Matter of fact, it's when we go over the 35% that it creates opportunities to fund the emergency reserve and the facilities reserve. So the council has complete discretion on reserve policies, right? You should set those reserves where you are comfortable with them being. But I think it would be helpful to look at them holistically and how they interplay with each other, what those purposes are. The emergency reserve, for example, was set up in 2013, and maybe that policy has been tweaked once or twice, but not in the last 8 or 9 years. So to look at that, to look at the general fund, 25 to 35%, is that still the right range? And if you want it to be 25 to 30%, the staff can advise you on what kind of money that frees up and what kind of risk you may see in reducing from a 35 to a 30, what that could mean for a credit rating or a crisis. We can provide you all that, but ultimately, yes, you have that full discretion.
And changing that policy is just a simple ordinance? We'd
It'd be a resolution.
be a resolution? Okay. But we would still discuss it, notice it, vote on it?
Yeah,
I'd be open to the discussion,
Yeah.
sure. I'm not really in a position where I think that one course of action, I'm not at a place to commit to a course of action, but to talk about it and go through that stuff, I'm very much okay with that. And I really appreciate that approach because I think, as a public body, I think, making sure that our decisions are well-reasoned, especially when it comes to financial responsibility, in just all different kinds of ways the climate we're in, I really appreciate that way of going about it.
I also like the timing of having this conversation after we know what's going on with property tax reform at the state level, because my understanding is the reserve and facilities fund was generated after a previous property tax reform.
the emergency reserve was, the facilities was kind of a separate issue unrelated to property tax reform, but emergency reserve was created in wake of the 2013 property tax reform.
Yeah. So it feels like this is the time to talk about it. We'll have a new
Good
property
point.
tax scheme, whatever it is, hope in another week.
Your guess is as good as mine.
So while this is a return to agenda items, in terms of looking at the info packet, if we go back to the pending work topics, can we move that pending topic up?
The review of the financial, you can
Yes,
schedule it for.
so that we can talk about this sooner,
You
rather,
can-
once. But I
Can
do
we-
agree in this climate, and for everything that counselors have said, that an open conversation and also looking at what our possibilities are in relation to sort of what's going on holistically makes a lot of sense. And then also to recognize that we have that discretion.
Can we, or would you council be comfortable if staff committed to providing you that information for one of the May meetings? I'd like to talk to staff before I say we can do it in the first meeting in May, but I'm comfortable in saying we can at least get to the second meeting in May.
And that's 2 meetings from now. Is that acceptable?
Fine with me.
May
Talk
19th?
about-
To talk about reserves?
That's after the budget because,
The budget's tonight.
yeah, I know, but I was hoping to create a line item. And not only, but it started with a 5.1 million for affordable housing and continue add to it. I think the mayor is very interested in that too, and myself, and I think we have enough people to do that. How can we do, if we want to do that, how can we do that?
Can't we do an amendment?
Talk about it, an amendment during the budget conversation tonight.
Yes.
Yeah, I want to talk with the finance staff maybe between meetings and get you that leading into the formal meeting, if that's okay.
If there's going to be a bunch of amendments for the budget, I guess I'd also like advice from you or our attorney on what's ethical and legal for amendments. I mean, we've been talking about the budget for 4 months, and now offering amendments at the last meeting, I feel uncomfortable like proposing a budget that's not what we've noticed to the public.
I don't know.
I just don't know if it's ethical to do that. I mean, we have had 4 months to say, let's make this. I'm not saying I'm against your idea. I actually think I would support it. I'm against sort of the procedural element of, hey, this is what we're going to do, this is what we're going to do, telling the public about it, giving them notice, and then at the meeting where we're supposed to adopt it, say, hey, wait, I'd like to change. It doesn't feel like the right way to do business to me.
You know, if I'm going to talk about myself for my ask. If I'm asking you to reduce a budget from any kind of another department, that could be really interrupting, and I agree. But I'm asking to take money from the reserve and make it like money is sitting there, and we are adding a new line item. That's if we are doing something good, we can do it anytime. And if we are not affecting any another kind of budget, I think, it's not going to be a big of a deal.
What I would, and I'm sorry to interrupt, I guess what I would say is it seems like we have strayed pretty far from the work session agenda, speaking of items that are noticed up. I would adopt Jeff's policy, or Jeff's proposal that he and I and finance staff talk between meetings so that we can understand what's available as an option, both for, well, I assume you're talking about the fiscal year 27 budget. So we are under some constraints, and I want to have a better understanding about what those are so that we can give you good answers.
During the formal meeting.
Yes.
Thank you.
Perhaps even before if we have enough time.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Is there anything else on this? Okay. Our last work session agenda is council updates on assigned boards, commissions, and committees.
Sean and I met with our fire chief and our police chief. We both serve on the JEC board, so it was from that. That's why it's an update on boards and committees.
Yep.
Sorry. So the JEC board voted last meeting to engage a consultant around replacing the CAD, which is computer-aided dispatch system, which will be a very large undertaking. And so we wanted to talk with our chiefs about Iowa City's needs in that process. And I thought it was a really good conversation that we had. And we'll make sure that, Iowa City is well represented in what needs to happen. And I think it was very educational just in terms of how cumbersome data migration is, which we all know probably from some aspects of our lives, but.
Yeah, agreed. Thank you to staff and to the chiefs for meeting with us and giving us some insight that we wouldn't otherwise have. One other thing is a big undertaking, and JEC is, of course, it's one of the entities that we all pay into as taxpayers in this county. But it's also something that is sorely needed, and it will improve the response to the public ultimately in the way that our various different organizations, like 19 different, something like that, in the county that JEC handles between fire, EMS, and law enforcement agencies. So yeah, no, it's an exciting thing to see happen.
Anyone else?
Thank you.
Okay, now remind me, since we are done with work session, do we actually adjourn?
Yes, if you've exhausted all of your topics for the work session, and I believe you have,
I
if that's
believe-
the consensus of the council, then we adjourn.
We are adjourned until the formal session at 6 o'clock.